What is the disturbing backstory behind something that is widely considered wholesome? Sherman Kelly wrote the lyrics to Dancing in the Moonlight while recovering from a violent assault carried out on him and his girlfriend by a youth gang. He envisioned an alternative reality where people just dance and be happy all the time. It was his way of dealing with the trauma. To think that so many people have such good memories from that song, though. He really created something beautiful for everyone from his trauma. Access to comfort and reframing traumatic situations in a healthy way is a good way to avoid PTSD too, so could have also been deeply therapeutic. Like Weird Al, both of his parents died on the same day of carbon monoxide poisoning. He still did a concert that night saying, "Since my music had helped many of my fans through tough times, maybe it would work for me as well." Candyland was invented during the polio epidemic by retired school teacher Eleanor Abbott, who herself was recovering from polio. She invented the game to keep children entertained during their hospital stays who themselves were affected. Valentine's Day. Saint Valentine was killed for being the priest to marry people so men could get out of war. For this, he was beheaded. That does seem like a bit of an overreaction. Some people just lost their heads over the situation. I met a writer named Thomas Dish when I was in college. He wrote, "The Brave Little Toaster." He told us Disney hired him to write a movie about lions. He wanted to do King Lear with lions because the plot mirrored how lion prides operate. Old, lazy but powerful male, dangerous daughters. But Disney said they wanted a young hero. So he changed it to Hamlet with lions, uncle kills father, kid runs away, ghost of dad visits and calls for revenge, etc., but with a happy ending. Timon and Pumbaa are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Wrote, a treatment turned it in. They said thanks but no thanks and fired him. Movie comes out. They took his idea and didn't pay him. He said Disney was notorious for doing this to creators. I read years later that he took his own life. Never think of the Lion King without thinking about him. They made so much money off his idea and he got nothing. Voice actor for classic Disney Peter Pan died alone of a drug overdose in an abandoned warehouse after years of being unable to get work in Hollywood later in life. Bobby Driscoll couldn't get work after puberty hit, and he got bad acne, buried in an unmarked grave. Even worse, years after he died, his mom tried to get in touch with him because his dad was on his deathbed. The police were able to match a fingerprint and had to tell his parents he'd been dead for years. Interesting to note that while Bobby Driscoll has been dead for over 50 years, Wendy's voice actress, Catherine Beaumont, is still alive at 86. She was born only 1 year after him. The song, "Save the Last Dance for Me," by the Drifters was written by a man who was crippled by polio and in a wheelchair watching his new wife dancing with other men at his wedding to her because he couldn't. In the song he's saying that he's the one taking her home, not them. I don't think he's angry. He's just saying that no matter who she dances with, she's his wife and will be taking her home at the end of the night. In the animated film, All Dogs Go to Heaven, the little girl who plays Anne-Marie was murdered by her father prior to the film being released. Burt Reynolds struggled hard to finish recording his scene where Charlie says goodbye to the little girl one last time before going to heaven. It's a tear-inducing scene without knowing the backstory, but you can absolutely hear the pain in Burt Reynolds' voice. It's generally considered a very loving and touching moment, but knowing what happened makes it really hard to listen to that without getting emotional. Her father was a violent and abusive alcoholic who murdered both her and her mom. She was 10 years old. Police didn't press charges when the mother told them of the threats because there was no physical signs of abuse at the time of the report. A child psychologist found mental and physical abuse on Judith, but the Child Protective Services dropped the investigation when her mother told them she was divorcing the father. Despite her family and friends telling her to do it immediately, she didn't because she was afraid of losing the house and the money. Everyone dropped the ball so hard in that story. Most fairy tales. Disney has scrubbed all the Grimm out of the Brothers Grimm. In Cinderella, the evil stepsisters cut off their toes and heels trying to make the slipper fit and later have their eyes pecked out by doves. All of the original Brothers Grimm stories are really not for children, lol. What's crazy is the Grimm brothers actually went to extensive lengths to filter their stories before release. The originals that they compiled were much worse. They did a pretty shabby job editing them too. They were broke scholars who really only thought of the idea of a children's book after the fact. They did edit out a lot of the truly weird stuff, like incest, but they also heavily Christianized the tales and cut about 70% of the dialogue of women, among other things. We must remember the Brothers Grimm were not seeking to write a children's book. They were German scholars in a time where the German cultural identity was still forming. In the backlight of the Romantic period, they sought to collect and preserve cultural elements from the general population, including a significant amount of folk tales. And it was only when times became financially difficult that they turned towards commercial interests. The kids' book Love You Forever by Robert Munsch, As Long as I'm Living, My Baby You'll Be, was written in the wake of the stillbirth of the author and his wife's 2 babies. Sadder yet, it was a lullaby he sang to himself to cope years before he wrote it into a book. It's one of the most intimate connections an author's ever made with millions of people. I'm studying to be a funeral director. Had a family bring that specific book to a graveside and take turns reading from the pages over the grave while sobbing. Apparently the father, who died, had read that book to them when they were children, so now they wanted to read it to him to say goodbye. Great book. Sad but good. Hello Kitty was made as part of a national movement to cuttify Japan to distract from the abominable war crimes they committed in the Second World War. Bananas. You thought cocaine was a blood-soaked cartel and war-driven commodity? The banana trade makes cocaine look like a farmer's market. Also chocolate, coffee, tea, spices, and most tropical fruits. And meat. And seafood. Basically everything we eat, wear, and use. The song Pumped Up Kicks is catchy and was used in things like commercials and children's parties years ago. It's also pretty clearly about committing a school shooting. I was watching a school dance show when I heard it for the first time. My face went from intrigued to horrified after the first couple of verses. The Wizard of Oz could have its own behind-the-scenes movie with the amount of shit that went down. The Tin Man actor switcheroo. The original actor got massively sick from the silver body paint and couldn't continue, so they recast the role. I feel like I heard something was also off with the Green Witch makeup, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. Not off, exactly. But Margaret Hamilton got badly burned by one of the takes of flames shooting up and her disappearing through a trap door in Munchkinland. As the green makeup was copper-based, there was a bit of a race against time to get what they could off her burned hands so it wouldn't poison her. As her appearances in Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood still testify, she still thoroughly enjoyed the part. Back to the aluminum powder problem. If you listen to the soundtrack carefully, the 2 tracks of We're Off to See the Wizard, after meeting the Tin Woodsman, then the Lion both have Buddy Ebsen's voice, not Jack Haley's. They didn't bother re-recording those 2. Went to a community event last night, and 32 years later, Macarena still fills the dance floor. A bunch of teens learn the dance for the very first time. The lyrics are, of course, in Spanish, and about the titular Macarena having a threesome with her boyfriend's friends while he's swearing his military oath. Also interesting is that the band played traditional music primarily, and this was their first pop release, in their 50s. They went back to traditional music after. I always loved the translation of that. My boyfriend was out of town, and his 2 friends were so fine. The little girl who played Matilda, in the movie Matilda, Mom died before the movie was released of cancer. I believe the director showed her a rough cut before she passed, but geez, that made me sad to learn as an adult. I'm pretty sure Danny DeVito and his wife Rhea Perlman, Matilda's parents in the movie, took her in for a bit when this was going on. The weirdest trivia I know about her, Mara Wilson, is her cousin is Ben Shapiro. The reason cats and dogs like squeaky toys is not because the noise is funny, it's because the sound is similar to the death screams of their prey. Resusciani, the rubbery anatomical model we learned CPR on. The face is modeled after the death mask of an unidentified and unclaimed woman who drowned in the Seine River in the late 1800s. Toymaker Asmund S. Lertle chose to use the woman's face on the mannequin as he thought male trainees might be reluctant to kiss a man's face. The face was sculpted by the Norwegian-Danish sculptor Emma Mathiesen. There is also plenty of evidence stating that only having a male CPR dummy, no visible breasts, has inadvertently caused harm to women requiring CPR because people don't know how to give CPR to a woman with breasts. Henry Ford promoted square dancing in public schools, starting in the 1920s. Sound wholesome? He did it because he hated Jews and thought they invented jazz. He wanted to get America back to traditional, white and Christian, music and dancing. Free school lunches in America started because the military complained that during World War II that many 18-year-old men were too skinny to serve in the military. Free school lunches were added afterwards to make 18-year-old men strong enough to be drafted into the next war. The creator of Monopoly actually intended it as a warning about the dangers of capitalism, not a celebration of it. Everyone thinks The Ugly Duckling is a story about how it's okay to be ugly. But it's actually a story about how you can be pretty too one day. There was a ridiculous reality show a few years back, called The Swan. Women got tons of surgeries and cosmetic procedures. Didn't even look like the same people at the end. It was super creepy. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.